Hello, you lovely people. This is me, the Bombay Chef Varun Inamdar, and welcome to Rajshri Food. When it's absolutely scorching and hot, all we want to have is a nice cool beverage. And what better than a cold coffee? And even better when I show you 4 different varieties. Let's begin. Well, I'm going to show you 4 different varieties of cold coffee. One is making a coffee syrup at home, which is not only good for making your cold coffees, but you can also use this as your coffee syrup. The second recipe is that of a caramel syrup at home. Now, if you add in salt or if you add in cream, that becomes your salted caramel. If you add in cream, it becomes your butterscotch. The third component is where the variety of coffee begins. The first one is going to be cold coffee, classic build-up method, the way you would see in cafes in Vietnam and Korea and Cambodia and places like that. The next coffee is going to be a Nitro coffee. Nitro cold coffee or a cold brew is something that is trending across the globe. A very different variety of coffee. I'll of course come to that a little later. The third one is a chocolate frappuccino, which is of course chocolate and coffee and the goodness of all of that coming together. The fourth coffee and the sixth component that we have today is a Caramelito. Exactly the way you would see in one of the most prestigious cafes or coffee houses in the world. Let's begin with the coffee syrup, for which I am actually taking grain sugar. And before it even starts melting, I'm going to add in water because it's a syrup. You're going to make this in advance and keep this. You can also keep this refrigerated. If this is of course nice and cold, it is just half the battle won. It's just as easy as that. To this, I'm going to add in coffee. Now you can use your instant coffees, you can use your coffee beans, you can actually brew them together, you can actually steep them. Choice is completely yours. I'm just keeping life easy. I'm using instant coffee. If you are one of those connoisseurs who loves collecting coffees, bring in your best coffee beans, your Arabicas, your Robustas out. And this is where you actually roast them, you crush them, add it to the syrup, and right towards the end, once you know that they have steeped beautifully well, you strain them and your coffee syrup is done and ready. But for now, instant coffee is the way to go. Let's stir this well, let it boil for at least 3 minutes on high flame. By that time, your sugar will melt, the syrup will become nice and sticky. Do not overcook this because you do not want it to become like a toffee. But in this case, 3 minutes is just about perfect. Allow this to roll boil, and with this, of course, the flame. Let's swap the pans. Let's move on to the second component, and that is making caramel at home. Not for any other reasons, but for the cold coffee. For the caramel, in this case, we are making a wet caramel. Now the difference between a dry caramel and a wet caramel, very simple. Dry caramel is just about sugar getting caramelized. Wet caramel is a combination of sugar and water. How much water? Just a couple of tablespoons. Let's add that. The idea of making a wet caramel is very simple. The moment the sugar and the water hit the pan, do not start stirring it because the sugar will start recrystallizing. That is not something that you're looking at. You want the sugar to begin caramelizing, and once that happens, with the help of a wooden spoon or a spatula, no stainless steel in this case, you just mix it. Keep mixing it till all the sugar starts caramelizing. Very simple. After that, we'll add in some more things. Now, if you see and notice, it's beautifully bubbling. At the core, it is still white. But as you keep approaching the sides of the pan, the color is changing, and that's exactly what we're looking at. You slowly start incorporating all of this from the sides to the center of the pan, like so. Now this is the big difference between making a wet caramel and a dry caramel. This one is a wet caramel. Now, whenever you're adding butter or cream to caramel, you always need to remember the fact that the color is going to lighten eventually. Now, if this is really deep and caramel-like, the moment you add in cream, which is white in color, the color will drop in at least 4 notches down. That's why this has to be deep brown, so that the addition of cream makes it beautiful caramel-like. Once this color almost becomes like maple syrup, at this stage, I'm going to add in butter. Now, this also kind of makes it butterscotch-like, and along with this, cream. To kind of just accentuate the flavor, I'm also adding in vanilla essence. Let's mix all of this now. And with this, of course, the flame. With the reticent heat, this will continue to cook. This will continue to also change its color. That's what we're looking at. Ensure you keep stirring so that the heat is equally distributed. And at this stage, this is beautiful, just like any toffee that you would get off the shelf. With this, our most perfect caramel sauce is done and ready. Now, instead of adding this in your cold coffee, you can also cool this down, serve it with vanilla ice cream, and that's another dessert at hand. You can also use this as your syrup. You can keep this in bottles. Use this as a topping for your waffles, for your pancakes, and many such beautiful good things. For now, let's keep this aside and bring in our first coffee here. And that is a built-up cold coffee. Let's see how. For which, I'm going to need lots of ice in a glass. To this, I'm going to begin with our homemade coffee syrup. You can make it nice and intense. You can increase the volume of coffee to milk. You can keep playing the way you want. This is to my preference. Let's add in cold milk. The whole idea here is to ensure this goes to the table just like that. Deep brown, coffee brown, milk, and a little bit of froth. Let's now move on to our next coffee, which is the classic Nitro coffee. Let's do that. Lots of ice again. Our homemade coffee syrup, again as intense as you like and prefer. That's exactly how we want it. Fizzy and fantastic. And I'm going to top this up with aerated water. Drop this from a little bit of a height so that the fizz also gets a little bit of a froth, just like so. Here you have your second beverage, which is done and ready, which is Nitro coffee at home. Isn't that beautiful? Let's move on to our third coffee variety, which is a chocolate frappuccino, available across the globe. How to make it at home? Let's see right here. Lots of ice. And this is a classic blended coffee. To this, a homemade coffee syrup. To this, I'm going to add in chocolate syrup. And lastly, some milk. Let's blend this. And with this, your frappuccino is done and ready. Beautifully frothy, and that's exactly what we're looking at. For the build-up, of course, let's begin with ice. I'm deliberately leaving a little space, and that is to top this up with whipped cream. And finally, we top this up with some grated chocolate. Let's move on to the last coffee variety, and that is a Caramelito. This is basically a cold coffee which is churned with our homemade caramel syrup. Let's do that. Lots of ice. Our homemade coffee syrup, cold milk, and lastly, our homemade caramel syrup. Let's blend this. Before pouring this into the glass, I'm just taking our homemade caramel syrup in a piping bag and then just ensuring this goes all around the glass. That messy look, which actually sometimes also looks fantastic. Time to add in ice and top this up, Caramelito. I'm going to top this up with some whipped cream. Ensure it's nice and intense. Finally, some more of our caramel syrup. With this, ladies and gentlemen, our 4 varieties of cold coffee done and ready. Here we have the classic, we have the Nitro, we have the chocolate frappuccino, and finally, not the less one, the Caramelito. Try this for your family and friends. Go all out and impress them. Bye for now.